Hello and welcome to the 100th episode of me talking about my things and my experiences. Today I'm going to be talking about two things at the same time. One, the best gig I ever went to, and secondly, talking about U2's 2017 30th anniversary Joshua Tree tour that happened 4 years ago. Well, obviously when I started off doing these, there was a couple of things which I kind of set myself. First off, whenever I'm talking and I'm doing these are not academic submissions to be graded, rated, and checked for 100% historical accuracy. You shouldn't be using these in academic submissions. I'm just a guy talking about the music and the experiences and the things that I've had in my life, talking about the things that I love. And if your only contribution after all of that is to put in the comments, go, oh yeah, you got a thing wrong, you need to do more research, I think you're missing the point. This isn't research. This is me talking about my experiences and my relationships to the music and the things that happened, and I don't need to research the stuff that I lived because I was there. It always reminds me of Mike Scott from the Waterboys on Wikipedia. Someone said, well, how do you know this stuff? And it's like, dude, it's me. I'm the guy that you're writing about on this page. I know what happened. And the other thing is, if you're in the comments section, by the way, your only contributions is to say things like, tell me that I've got stuff wrong. Well, I don't have to put up with that. Manners cost nothing. And if that's too expensive for you, I'm not going to indulge it. So, with that to one side, today I'm going to talk about two things, which are both the same thing at the same time. The first one is the best gig I ever went to, and the second one, U2's Joshua Tree tour in 2017. Now, I have to start off with a bit of a history thing around here, is that to me, if you were like me on the 31st of December 1989, I think I was doing a really terrible job of being a 16-year-old because my mum and dad were out getting drunk. I was sat at home with a C60 and a C90 recording off BBC Radio 1 U2 live at the Point in Dublin on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. Obviously now there's a bootleg CD box set of it which I own instead. But obviously at that point, the one place in the universe I wanted to be right then, the one room I wanted to be in was at a U2 show in Dublin. I couldn't be. And so since then, I've made efforts to see the bands that I love play live as much as I reasonably can, as much as money and time and health allows. And, I'm still a kid. I'm still the same kid that I was when I was 16. I've just got a little bit older and, had a few more bolt-ons and a few more upgrades, converted certain parts of my body into fat and other parts of it into not having hair and so on and so forth. But that's, the natural progression of time, and nothing stays the same forever. And so for me, that's one of the reasons why I'm not a huge fan of nostalgia tours. I'm not a huge fan of playing albums in full tours because we only get one chance to live in the now. We only get one chance to live through 2021 or 2017 and to spend that time looking backwards and to think about what it was like in 1987. You're missing the opportunity to make new memories, new experiences, say new things about what it's like to be alive now, if you're constantly harking back to the past. Now, the Joshua Tree 30 tour, which happened in 2017, by the way, where U2 did for the first time, they went and did a nostalgia show. So I think it was a little bit different from your standard nostalgia shows, because in this respect, I didn't want them to do this tour. I always want the bands I love to be making new material. The past will always be there. The future will not always be there. And there's only so many shows, so many songs, so many albums left to make. And every speech that Bono gave at a show is a song I don't get. Every nostalgia tour is an album I don't get to experience and nobody gets to experience. So seeing U2 in 2017 performing an album from 1987, it was kind of weird because it was a way to go back and kind of glimpse what had happened. And obviously you don't know how you've got to where you are and where we are now without understanding how you've got there. But at the same point, you need to remember where you are and always have an eye on the present. And for the first time, U2 were looking back and travelling forward, not going forward. So the tour, which I thought was a great tour, but it was a reminder, an echo, a restatement of how good U2 were. It wasn't a statement of how good they still are. And it was, the band of then, representing the songs from then now as if those were new songs. It was a very, very strange kind of position to be in. So you can think about songs that you love, songs that speak to you constantly about your life, and think about how they're, in some respects, they're timeless, because what they do, these songs, is that they present, they exist outside of time, outside of history, and are permanent kind of expressions of common human themes forever. But the Joshua Tree at the time, 1987, it seemed to be fixed in certain economical, ethical, social situations, coming from a time in the mid-80s where Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher, the threat of nuclear war, the East-West Cold War that was going on, all of the socio-political, economic factors at the time, including the rise of HIV and AIDS as well, were all ongoing, and I think informed the record to an extent. And in one way, you can say, well, the pendulum of politics has swung back to the way it was in the 80s, where there's an eternal and endless battle between people and power, between money and the majority. And that's not to get political about it. That's just one of the things that happened, is that there's always going to be people that want to be rich, and there's always going to be people that are and don't want anybody else to be. So the Joshua Tree on this tour felt very much like an album that happened to come out 30 years ago, but was put in the context of the current day. And the tour was relatively short, so I think there are about 50 shows, stadium shows, which were announced, although they were announced in a somewhat piecemeal fashion. So first it was America and Canada and maybe Mexico, then it was Europe, UK and Ireland, and then it was again South America, a second round through America and Mexico, and then finally in 2019, the 32nd anniversary of the Joshua Tree tour, got to visit Australia, New Zealand, Korea, India, Japan, countries that the band hadn't visited in a long time or hadn't visited at all. I really thought it felt a little bit like it was a moment of almost a crisis of confidence, to say, well, the last album didn't sell because we gave it away, the tours were indoors, so therefore if we go back and remind people of who we used to be, maybe the next album will be better received. But I just wasn't a huge fan of this tour. I wasn't a huge fan of the concept of this tour. It felt to me like U2 were becoming their own tribute act as opposed to being their own band in their own right. However, if you are going to go back and play songs in an album in full from 30 years ago, this is exactly the way to do it, because in the middle of, obviously I talked a fair bit around the Experience tour, well, the Innocence and Experience tour, which recontextualised the band's past, their early years, focused on a lot of songs from the first 3 or 4 albums before the Joshua Tree came out, and then also kind of focused on the most recent material from Songs of Innocence. So to an extent, that was a history lesson about the band, the early years, and how they were adjusting to them now. The Joshua Tree tour opened with 4 or 5 songs, normally 4 songs, Sunday Bloody Sunday, New Year's Day, Bad or A Sort of Homecoming, and Pride, and on one show MLK. From the early years, kind of leading as almost a mini reprise, a kind of like, this is a snapshot of us in our very, very early years. And it was the 4 of them playing on a stage, no video, just a small stage in the middle of the venue, trying to turn Wembley Stadium or Twickenham Stadium or Croke Park or Brussels or anywhere into the biggest small club gig that you've ever been at. And what we saw with that was, 4 musicians making a racket, communicating as musicians, no staging, before they then moved into playing the Joshua Tree album in full. And playing the Joshua Tree album in full, I think, was difficult from a pacing perspective, because the album's sequenced in such a way that it doesn't necessarily work as a live show. And so, for example, You've got, Where the Streets Have No Name, I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For, With or Without You, as 3 songs. And then you've got a huge shift of consciousness and of style and approach to Bullet the Blue Sky, which, by the way, had been retired for the tour in 2009 to 2011. And this time, on the 2005-2006 tour, Bullet the Blue Sky felt a little bit perfunctory, like the band almost had to play it through a sense of obligation, because it fit thematically into the set. The fire, which I think the band had played it with previously, wasn't really there. It was back in 2015. 2017, it was a huge kind of left field turn from With or Without You into Bullet the Blue Sky. It felt like someone was shunting you from one lane to another. And it was pretty weird, really, and I think it didn't necessarily work. And so the rest of the set, by the way, was the album in full. So Red Hill Mining Town played for the first time, In God's Country, One Tree Hill, Trip Through Your Wires, Exit, Mothers of the Disappeared. And they addressed a series of themes, but each song on its own kind of sat as an individual song as opposed to part of a wider narrative. And it was only when you got to the end of the show with Mothers of the Disappear segueing, is that how it's pronounced, into Miss Sarajevo, and kind of drawing a thematic line between, conflicts that transcend decades, nations, continents, all that type of stuff around the eternal nature of conflict. Really kind of then moved into Beautiful Day and that sense of resolution. And so the last 6 or 7 songs in the set were always kind of like a fairly heavy on hits. So, for example, you'd have Beautiful Day, Elevation. Most shows would have Vertigo, not all of them. You'd have Ultraviolet. Sometimes you'd have Mysterious Waves. You'd have One. And then sometimes you'd have I Will Follow, or other day at nights you'd have a song called The Little Things That Give You Away, which was the first song played live from Songs of Experience, which at that point was 6 months out and hadn't been announced yet. So U2 were closing their biggest shows in a decade with an unreleased song that hardly anybody had ever heard before. I think one of the risks of the album in full shows is that albums are designed to be listened to at home or on the move. They're not designed to be listened to in rooms with 80,000 people standing around you. And Red Hill Mining Town, which hadn't been played live before, was always the song where the field tangibly emptied. You could feel a little bit more space, even if you were crammed right up at the front. It felt like everyone was, I'm going to go for a wee, and I'm going to go and get a drink, and then I'm going to go and listen to side 2 before the hits come up. And in terms of the sequencing of the show, traditionally the show kind of starts at a high, dips a little, oddly enough when Red Hill Mining Town starts, then kind of slowly recovers back up to all the hits. So by the end, everyone's waving their beer in the air and jumping up and down. But what it also did, this tour, was it gave an opportunity for Exit to be played, which I think should be played far more frequently. In fact, they should retire Bullet the Blue Sky and play Exit at most of the shows instead, because I think that was a staggeringly potent live. And they played Mothers of the Disappeared, which, by the way, had not been played in Europe before when I saw them. And also Miss Sarajevo, when they played it in Dublin, that was the longest gap ever between the recording of a song by U2, although obviously it was Passengers, which is U2 with Pavarotti and Brian Eno, the recording of a song and the performance of the song in Dublin. And Miss Sarajevo, I think, is the song that has been played the most, but also has been played the least in Dublin. So it's been played something like 120 times, but once publicly in Dublin, and that was 22 years after the album was released. Actually, I've just checked it. By the time it got to the tour, Miss Sarajevo had been played 183 times. And of that, approximately 0.5% of those appearances had been in Dublin. It's strange and unusual, but so be it. Now, on a performance level, what I also noticed is that Bono's voice has changed over time. So the high notes that he used to hit on Ultraviolet, Miss Sarajevo, even when I saw them in Paris in 2010, he would sing the opera section from Miss Sarajevo. And at this point, it was actually using the pre-recorded Pavarotti vocal from the studio version instead of Bono singing it. But my approach was was really around the whole tour is it wasn't going to be my favourite U2 tour. I knew that going in because it was retrospective, it was nostalgia, it was not creating new connections or new music or new presentation. It was old music that was being sold to us. And on some of the shows, the freshest song was 13 years old, which is far more of a nostalgia act than I think U2 have ever wanted to be. Of course, when you've got 80,000 people playing air guitar to Vertigo or Elevation or Beautiful Day, that's fine. That's part of the devil's bargain, is that the people have a set of expectations about what that show's going to be. And if you don't deliver upon those expectations, there is going to be a sense that the band are perhaps not as good or are failing in some way. And there's always somebody that tells Bono to shut up and just play the music, man. And that's fine. But that's just one opinion in a sea of many. I loved this tour, but I didn't love this tour for its artistic approach. It was too close to nostalgia for my liking, and it was risky in that respect because it started to remove the very clear sense of time and timeliness from it. It turned U2 into a bit of a touring jukebox of their own previous greatness, and I'd rather leave that for other bands, really. I think you have to be careful, and I've made it at least 16 minutes into this without quoting God Part 2's Glorify the Past because the future dries up, but you have to be wary about that. And if you love a band, you set a higher expectation on the band than I think other people do, because it comes from a place of criticism, can come from a place of great love, actually, because you're invested and you care about the band. And I actually wish that this band, that U2 hadn't toured this album, maybe done a couple of shows, or maybe kind of put a section from the Joshua Tree into their touring, but it did cost us several months of band activity. Well, part of that could be that they'd signed the deal with Live Nation. Guy Oseary was the manager, although I think he's more of an enabler than a manager, because I think a manager pushes back against some decisions, and there's no evidence that Guy Oseary does that. I think the other thing is that it felt to me that it was the first time that the band were looking back and not forwards. And if you're looking back, you're going to end up crashing into a wall if you do it all the time. Now, I saw 5 shows on this tour, and in order to give you, I have to hold back the first show because the first show is the end. But the 5 shows that I saw 3 at Twickenham, I saw 1 in Dublin, and one in Brussels. I'm going to show you a couple of bootleg CDs, actually. So this is a bootleg CD, which is the mixing desk recording from the mixing desk in Twickenham. It's as good as an official release. This difficult to get, I think. Maybe only pressed a few hundred of these. It comes in a trifold sleeve here, presumably for a 3rd CD or a booklet. In there was the fairly standard approach. All of these bootleg CDs, by the way, take a similar approach. You've got an iconic picture on the front. The gatefold opens up. You've got a poster for the gig itself, and then you've got the 2 CDs on here plus some pictures. And the second, the CD here has 2 bonus tracks on there. You're the Best Thing About Me and Get Out of Your Own Way. Get Out of Your Own Way was recorded at Trafalgar Square in November 2017. Which was a show that I went to, and I'll talk about when we get to the Songs of Experience period. This is the 3rd show that I saw. This is live in London, Twickenham, July the 9th, 2017. It's the same set list, by the way, as the night before, with the exception that Ultraviolet has been, the little things that give you away has been dropped, and Mysterious Ways has been inserted in between Vertigo and Ultraviolet. So this is the show where no song on the set is less than 13 years old. And so that, by the way, is Twickenham in the background there. You can tell by the roof. I really shouldn't be able to identify a venue by its roof, but there you are. There's the poster, I think, for Twickenham on the Sunday. Support came from Noel Gallagher's High Flying Birds, which was almost everybody that was in the final lineup of Oasis, apart from the bass player and the errant singer Liam Gallagher, who I'm not a fan of. This is a bootleg CD from Paris, again from the mixing desk. I did order the Dublin share, but they sent me Paris instead. I couldn't be bothered to spend the money to send it back, because it would have actually cost me almost as much as it was worth. And effectively doubled the cost of it. So that's the Paris show. Again, pictures of the various band members on the CDs. And this is the fourth one, which is live at Brussels. This is the last of the Joshua Tree shows that I got to see in one of my favourite cities in the world. Of the cities where I have felt most at home, it's London, Brussels and Dublin. And of course I got to see the tour in London, Brussels and Dublin, although the two factors are not related. But this was recorded in the Twickenham Stadium, which is a really strange layout for a stadium, I must admit. I'm not a huge fan of it. On the tour, there's the and then some extra sleeves there. So there's the poster, or more correctly, the advert for the show. Tuesday, August the 1st, 2017. Great memories from this tour. Again, the friendships which I've made on the Innocence tour perpetuated and maintained themselves throughout this tour. I was a very lucky man actually to have some of the experiences. There's also a bootleg DVD, well, not a DVD, a Blu-ray here of the Amsterdam Arena show. No official live concert release has been made from this tour yet, at least not in a full-length form. So there is a motion picture which I think is called Heartland, which has been filmed by Anton Corbijn, which is being prepared and has been ready for quite some time. Once cinemas are reopened, it will probably appear at the cinema. But this is what I've been watching in the past 4 years. There was also another couple of releases which occurred around about the same time. Red Hill Mining Town was released as a picture disc single for Record Store Day, effectively a one-sided, one-track, well, double A-sided, one-track 12-inch picture disc. This also has the T-shirt, plastic bag that's compostable, but I've put it around the picture disc. Red Hill Mining Town was re-recorded by Bono, as his voice had changed and he wanted to go back and give it another shot. There was also, by the way, a deluxe edition version of the Joshua Tree. I've mentioned this in a previous episode. 4 CDs, the studio album, a B-side CD, a live CD recorded at Madison Square Garden, and an extra CD of alternate studio mixes and remixes and stuff after the fact. I can't say I was a huge fan of releasing this, because like many people, when it comes to reissues, I don't buy it to hear the Joshua Tree again. I know how good the Joshua Tree is. I buy it for the extra stuff that's on there that I can't get from anywhere else, and there's quite a lot of it. Also, if you're a member of the fan club, there was a series of 4 10-inch singles released here called the Joshua Tree Singles Remastered and Live. So the remastered versions of the 4 singles, With or Without You, Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For, Where the Streets Have No Name, and In God's Country, backed with live versions recorded on the Joshua Tree tour on 4 10-inch singles. I do wish they'd just stuck a full-length live show out on 4 10-inch singles, actually. And that would have been just a lovely way of marking the tour. But Heartland, the film, and presumably the concert movie soundtrack, has yet to be released, so they did this instead. There was also a tour programme, because like every U2 tour, there is now a tour programme, which is here. I'm going to talk you through the tour programme. This is for the second part of the tour, when it went back to, as you can see, North America, South America. These are some photographs of the band taken by Anton Corbijn on a beach in the Netherlands in 2015, presumably later designed to look like it was the desert, and they were going back to the desert. There's an essay around the importance of Bullet the Blue Sky. There is a conversation with, I think, Bono and Dave Batstone, ethics professor at the University of San Francisco, and Brian Draper, whoever he might be, which is to talk about human rights in South America. And to me, this felt very much like it's not actually U2 related content. This is an excuse to sell pictures of U2 with some explanatory text that's against it. And there's an essay about Bullet the Blue Sky by Andrew Mueller, tracking the change and the various live versions and interpretations that the band had done over time. And I must admit, Bullet the Blue Sky live was never my favourite song. It was the song on the Vertigo tour, which I found was the least inspired staging of it, where I took a break from the set. Not necessarily so easy to do that if you're in a football stadium and you're right down the front. But what I haven't talked about yet is the best gig I ever went to, which was the first show that I ever saw on the Joshua Tree 30 tour, which was at London's Twickenham Stadium on the Friday before the first show. So the first show, July 8th, 2018, Twickenham Stadium, as you can see, absolutely jam-packed with 80,000 or so people there. I saw U2 the night before with Mark Peterborough and another friend of mine, Lorcan. And I have to talk you through this show because on the night before they start a tour, U2 sometimes play a rehearsal show to an invited audience. Sometimes it's 50 people, sometimes it's a couple of hundred. Just to make sure that everything is working and in place before they present themselves to the general public, so to speak. Like a dry run. You know, you practice the speech in the mirror before you go and give the speech. This is what they were doing. And so I was thinking, on the Friday morning, I was walking into work. I was like, oh, I'm going to get to see U2 tomorrow. That's going to be the highlight of my weekend. That's going to be great. Tonight, quiet night in, not going to do anything, just conserve my energy before I go and see U2 tomorrow. Walking up the hill, I get a text message on my phone. And the text message says, do you want to see U2 do a rehearsal tonight? And my response is unprintable in a family newspaper, but it does include the words, what the actual fuck, in there. And I pretty much walked straight into work after that. And I went into somebody at work and went, I need to take this afternoon off. I really, really need to take this afternoon off. I can't be at work this afternoon. Lots of text messages, lots of phone calls. People who'd had nights out had to reschedule their various nights and their various plans. And as it turned out, that the band were going to do a rehearsal warm-up in the stadium on the Friday to an invited audience of people that worked with and near the London Fire Brigade. And I knew somebody that worked at the London Fire Brigade. And he sent me the email. I'm like, my God, man, okay. And then I read the email again and I went, can we get somebody else in here? Because I thought if it's just me and him, that's going to be great. But I really know a guy that loves U2 that I really want to have at the show. I think it'd be really, really important. And it'd be a really lovely thing if I could do that. So I rang up Mark Peterborough and I went, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but if you could get to London tonight, you might be able to see U2 play a free show at the Twickenham Stadium. And I could kind of hear the cogs going and going, geez, that's going to be difficult, isn't it? But not long after, the text message came back. It's pretty much, we're on. So there's me and Mark and Lorcan, and we're going to go and see U2 play at Twickenham Stadium at an invite-only show the day before they open the Joshua Tree tour at the Twickenham Stadium. And I just was like, we can't blow this. We just have to do everything that they say, as they say it. Turn up, photo ID, pack your passport, be well behaved, don't crowd the band, just go in there. And so we turned up, we showed our photo ID, we were walked into the stadium by the band's PA and somebody that worked for the press unit for our fire brigade, and we just walked in and we just saw this huge empty Twickenham Stadium with everything all set up at the back. And I mean, to give you an idea of what it looked like, I'll just tell you, this is what it looked like for me when they were playing Where the Streets Have No Name in the stadium. I was the nearest person to U2 when they were doing that part of Where the Streets Have No Name. And bearing in mind, I hadn't seen the show then, so I didn't know what was going to happen. I just kind of thought, that's incredible, man. That's like beyond anything that I ever thought I'd get to experience. Now, the first thing that happened is that Bono came out and he did a chat. He obviously is very good at chatting with people and probably thrives off that. But talking to people around, like, for example, he says the whole show is designed so that if it doesn't work for someone in the back row, way back there, it doesn't work at all. And you kind of got a sense that, to an extent, the interactions that he was having, people always asked him the same question. He always had an answer that was ready. So if someone said, "Well, can you play Kite?" and he's like, "Don't ask me. Ask Edge. Edge is in charge of the set list," which is probably not strictly true. But having seen U2 in stadiums, having seen them in the TFI Friday show, for example, the idea that U2 are for these four people that make music as opposed to this huge, enormous multimedia kind of presentation is a little bit strange. So, for example, when the first song that they played, they came out and on the B stage, they played "The Little Things That Give You Away," and I'll give you kind of like this is a photograph that I took with that, and to be able to see the hairs on their individual arms, to be able to see the muscles in Bono's neck straining as he was singing, be able to see the bits of dirt on their individual shoes. That's the type of thing that you kind of think, well, U2 aren't people. They're kind of weird abstract concepts that exist in my television. And to see, these individuals just doing a day's work and turning up at the office was really, really strange. There's during "Where the Streets Have No Name," and "Where the Streets Have No Name" is the second song that they play, by the way. So normally there's a segue and there's, everyone's chanting along, and then "Where the Streets Have No Name" starts. I'll take a picture of. I'll show you a picture I took. This is like a selfie that I took. This is me down there, as was. Obviously, that's Bono there, and the rest of the band. And I was the only guy on the rail during that show. So to be able to have that, and I was going, I've got to memorize, I've got to remember all of this stuff, because this is the kind of stuff that you wouldn't believe would happen. If you're a fan of a band and they're like one of your favourite bands in the world, and you were going, I get to see them play to a nearly empty stadium. There were 48 people that were invited to the show. I stood at the back of the stadium. Well, I stood very near the back. So this is during I still haven't found what I'm looking for, third song. And I took this photograph, and I'm like, I want to see the whole crowd there. And that was probably the smallest individual personal crowd of people that they'd played to for a very long time. But I was like, that's it there. I'm at the back of the venue, and behind me was this enormous football stadium that again had nobody in it. So I'll give you an example. During Beautiful Day, that was, I turned around and Bono's just standing there on the B stage. No one's looking at him, I think, pretty much, singing and watching the band while the rest of the empty stadium is just behind him. And I just got this sense that Bono was a fan of the band as well, And if you're in a band, you probably should be a fan of your own band. But I just got the sense that he was just like, wow, I get to do this for a living. I'm really lucky. And there was a look in his eyes where it's like, that's my job. Wow. And obviously, you don't necessarily get a chance to have that emotion when there's 80,000 people that are looking at you. There was like this moment where I was like, I'm the closest person in the whole stadium to the band where they're playing, Where the Streets Have No Name. And Bono reached out to touch the flame, and I was like the nearest human to him. And there weren't that many people around me. There was maybe 100 people in the whole of the stadium. And by the way, at the back was Noel Gallagher. And Noel Gallagher was talking about this show because he said he saw them do it. And then, when they played Where the Streets Have No Name, the lighting guys, they turned around and they stopped and they watched it. Because it's one of those moments where you know something special is happening in the music. It's not just music. It's almost like it's a communion between human souls that are working on a way that is beyond words or beyond language. Music is a universal language, and it's like, if you're having absolutely fantastic sex with somebody and there's this amazing sense of communication between you and that person, it's almost like that, but it's on a musical basis as opposed to a physical one. And it was like, I was like, bloody hell, man, this is the best gig of my life. This is the best show, one of the best nights of my life. is this right now, and it's really, really strange sometimes to have that moment. It happened when I saw New Order at Manchester Apollo in 1998. It happened with this show. It's happened one other time at a gig where I'm going, this is it. There's a theory in psychology around peak experiences, which is that humans, as creatures, we occasionally get to have things which are called peak experiences, moments where you realise that there is something that is incredible and rare that is happening to you. And I think psychologists say that something like only 2% of humans ever realise that they're having a peak experience at the time that they're having it. And I've had a peak experience, time when I've realised I've been in the presence of something that I will remember forever in the rest of my life, maybe 5 times. And 2 of those were when humans entered the world and were born. And the other 3 times, one was New Order at Manchester. I was like, music and art is the thing that has saved me, has given me a map and a path through a world that seemed like it was hostile and I was lost in it, and music showed me the way through it. And New Order's music did that, U2's music did that, and to be able to be in Twickenham Stadium with 48 other people and the band as they played the song Beautiful Day, which has that wonderful line, touch me, take me to that other place, which to me encapsulates the entire of what music is about, which is that music is a way of transporting the human soul to something beyond the mere confines of the flesh and the experience, to be able to access a world that you can really only touch when you're experiencing art, some sense of a revelation, some sense of hidden knowledge where suddenly, all the walls turn to glass and the world explodes up in front of you. And I was like, my God, man, I'm seeing this. This is happening, and it's a profound moment. It really, really is, and I'm very, very, very lucky to have experienced even one of those moments, let alone multiple occasions where I felt like that. Where I'm like, the world has changed, even if it's only in a very, very tiny way. But I've seen that change. I've been there when the world has changed. To think about maybe the rock shows that have changed the face of the earth, or the way in which people, define culture and history. When I saw Pink Floyd at Live Aid, that was a historic moment. But when I saw U2 at Twickenham, and there were 48 other people there, that was a historic moment for 48 people. That's the kind of moment where they go, I can't believe this. And there was a strict curfew of 9 p.m, which meant the band could only play for 50 minutes. The whole thing was done by 8:35, by the way. So I think they came on at 7:30 or something like that. We spent 45 minutes beforehand. Free pizza, champagne, chat with Bono. Lots of people got selfies with him. I really, really wanted to ask him some questions that I've never heard asked. I never really had the opportunity. And amongst those questions, one would have been, well, what's happening with the Rattle and Hum box set? Which I really, really wish I'd asked. But we got to have a couple of minutes chat with Adam. But we were also aware that there were 48 other people that wanted to have a conversation with Adam about anything. And I just didn't have the opportunity to do so. But I got the sense that sometimes, if you're in a band, you're a fan of your own band, because that band is more you than any other band that there is on the face of the planet. It's quite literally their life's work. And if you're not going to dedicate your life towards something, if you're an artist, if that something isn't really, really important to you, I think, otherwise it's just a job. And there are plenty of better paying jobs than being a musician. I wish there weren't. I wish musicians were paid what they were worth, which is millions of pounds. Obviously, U2 are paid millions of pounds, but I wish all the musicians were paid enough money to never have to worry about, I have to fit this band in between, annual leave at the bank or wherever it is that they work. But I know that happens. And we just got to the point where I think there was another couple of songs. So they played Red Hill Mining Town. So they played The Little Things That Give You Away, Where the Streets Have No Name. I still haven't found what I'm looking for. Red Hill Mining Town, Miss Sarajevo, Beautiful Day, Mysterious Ways, and Vertigo. And that's 8 songs. That's 40 minutes. But I got to see U2 play a 40-minute, 8-song set with 50 other people in an empty football stadium. And that's the kind of experience that, if you're lucky, you get once. just once, you know. And my God, what an experience it was. So I've talked about that, and there was moments where I kind of thought, the band have clearly designed the show to be seen visually. So you've got that moment there, the beginning of Where the Streets Have No Name, and I'm kind of there going, I can count the individual hairs on Edge's arm as he plays the beginning to Where the Streets Have No Name, and I'm the nearest person around. It's one of those experiences that you go, if that isn't the best gig of your life, you've probably seen, the best gig that ever happened on the face of the goddamn planet. I do remember I was watching, I think it was Beautiful Day, and I was at the barrier, and there's like 50 people around me, and I just turned around to Mark and I just went, wow, that's just wow. It's the kind of thing which elevates beyond words and experiences, and all the rubbish that I have been through in the course of my life, where people have not treated me with the dignity that I deserved, or all the times when I struggled with, should I continue? Should I stay alive? Is this fight worth having? Is this agony which I was experiencing, which I did at a number of occasions in the 20 or so years before that gig, but was it? And then I was like, in the middle of the gig, and I was like, this is why I have fought through all the other stuff. This is why I've got up at stupid o'clock. This is why I haven't given in, because I knew there was amazing experiences out there. I just hadn't had them. I hadn't found them yet. And that show was one of those experiences where I was like, it was worth it. All the other crap I've had to put up with was paid off by having an experience like that is beyond my imagination. I was like, I can't have a show that good. I never thought, when I was 20 and I had next to no money and I had to walk past Cardiff Arms Park whilst U2 were playing Zoo Station and I didn't have the money to get in, to go through that, and that really hurt at that point. But at some point I went, this is not forever. It's just a moment. This time won't last. And the future will be a beautiful day. And then to get to that and you go, yeah, that's the payoff. That's the thing. That's what I knew at some point in the future I would get to experience. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't say, by the way, today's going to be, the best gig of your life. You just suddenly get to a moment where, almost like John Belushi in the Blues Brothers, when the light comes down and it shines on him and he goes, hallelujah, I have seen the light. And you have that moment where it's like, this is it. This is one of the best experiences in my life. And it happened. I got to see a band that changed who I am, and a band that made my life make a lot more sense when I was lost in the world. And I got to see them do that. And I got to see something which hardly anybody ever gets to see. And I was like, basically, I am a lucky bastard, and I know it. But it's better to be lucky and to know it than to not know it, or not to be lucky. It's just pure providence. It's just a pure set of coincidental facts that all aligned perfectly so that Mark and Lorcan and I could see U2 play to 48 people in an empty Twickenham Stadium, and I could see U2 in a way that I will never ever forget. The video of the show exists. I think it was on Periscope, but I don't know if Periscope still exists. It's undoubtedly saved on some people's hard drives in some places. What I will do, though, is I'll also point out, this is the set list that was on, I think it was the stage. So it doesn't look like much, but that was the best gig I ever saw. And what an experience it was. Of course, after that, everything's downhill. No gig's ever going to be as good as that. But there is one that was almost as good. Probably about that far off from being as good as that, which happened in 2018, which I'll talk about at some other point. So that's today. That's the 100th instalment of Mark Talks About His Stuff. That's U2's Joshua Tree 2017. And that's the best gig that I ever saw. Thank you for indulging me talk about my experiences. I will see you soon. In the meantime, play friendly in the comments, be lovely, and I will see you all again soon. Thank you, and stay beautiful. Bye.